Last Christmas Eve, I had to choose between spending the holiday alone or watching my son Michael choose his manipulative wife over his dying father. Michael looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, if you can't get along with Jennifer, then maybe you shouldn't come to Christmas dinner anymore." What Michael didn't know was that the house he was planning to inherit, the house worth $850,000, was going on the market the next morning. 3 months later, Michael called me in tears, begging me not to sell the family home. But it was too late. The son who chose his wife over his father had just lost the biggest inheritance of his life. This is the story of how one Christmas Eve ultimatum cost my son everything he thought he'd inherit, and taught him that some choices can't be undone. My name is Arthur Donovan, and I'm a 74-year-old widower who spent 50 years building a successful plumbing business. My wife Catherine and I raised 3 children in the same house where I still live today, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial that we bought in 1975 for $45,000 and is now worth $850,000. My son Michael was always the responsible one. While his sisters moved away for college and careers, Michael stayed local, worked in my plumbing business, and eventually took it over when I retired. He married his college sweetheart, Jennifer, 15 years ago, and they seemed happy enough. When Catherine died 3 years ago, Michael and Jennifer were supportive during the funeral and the difficult months that followed. Michael would check on me regularly, and Jennifer would bring me home-cooked meals. I thought we had a good relationship. But about 2 years ago, Jennifer started making comments about my living situation. She'd say things like, "Arthur, this house is so big for just one person. Have you thought about downsizing?" Or, "Arthur, maintaining this place must be exhausting at your age." What Jennifer was really saying was that she wanted me out of the house so she and Michael could move in. The house was in a desirable neighborhood, had been completely renovated, and was worth far more than anything they could afford on their own. Michael never directly asked me to move out, but I could see him agreeing with Jennifer's suggestions. He'd nod along when she talked about senior living communities or smaller condos that might be more appropriate for someone my age. I wasn't ready to leave the house where Catherine and I had raised our children and built our life together. Every room held memories, and I was still perfectly capable of maintaining the property. But Jennifer was determined to get me out. After Catherine passed, I built a rhythm that kept me sane. Mornings in the kitchen with the good percolator Catherine swore made coffee taste like Sunday. A walk down Maple Street to check the creek after heavy rain. Thursdays at the supply house just to jaw with the old-timers about copper prices, and the rookie techs who still over-tighten every fitting. These small cadences mattered. They were the nails keeping the frame of my days together. Michael's crew still stopped by when they needed a specialty tool I'd kept since the Carter administration. I liked being the man with the solution in a battered red toolbox. Jennifer began to frame those stop-bys as disruptions. She called them drop-ins. She called my garage clutter. She called my workshop a hazard for little feet. It was all gentle, coated with concern, but the subtext was as loud as a bad sump pump. At 2 a.m., Jennifer's parents visited more often that second year. Good people on paper, but each hello came with an appraisal. A comment about paint colors that would brighten the living room. A suggestion that the formal dining room could be opened into the kitchen for flow. Flow, they said, as if the house I plumbed with my own hands had a circulation problem that only a sledgehammer could fix. They were teaching Michael to see possibility, which is another word for vacancy when you are the man still living there. The neighborhood shifted around me too. Couples pushing strollers at dusk, the kind who wave with a reusable coffee cup in hand. Realtors started leaving glossy postcards in my mailbox showing sale prices that would make Catherine whistle and then tell me not to get any ideas. I kept the cards in a drawer, not as temptation, but as tally marks of a world that wanted the house more than it wanted me. At church, the pastor organized a seniors luncheon, and Jennifer signed me up without asking. She stood at coffee hour telling anyone within earshot that it would be good for Arthur to be around people his own age. I have never understood the assumption that age enjoys itself best in a corral. I went anyway, sat with men who fixed roofs and fences until their knees argued with them, and listened. I am not above company, only conscription. Money was never the wedge between Michael and me until it became a lever for Jennifer. She talked openly about equity like it was a family savings jar on the kitchen counter. Michael tried to be the translator. Dad, imagine the college funds we could establish. Dad, imagine the travel you and Mom never took. I did imagine. Then I imagined walking past the pantry door where the pencil lines marked each kid's growth. And I knew I was not done walking past it. The grandchildren were my better argument for staying. Saturday mornings in my workshop became a standing appointment. We built a birdhouse that leaned and a step stool that didn't. Jennifer began to ration those visits. Dust, she said. Fumes, she said. I set up a second bench outside and bought masks the children thought made them look like astronauts. Jennifer nodded approval, then started booking them in back-to-back activities that always seemed to land on Saturday morning. I kept my own counsel, but not my paperwork. I updated the trust, checked beneficiary designations, and sat with Patricia, my attorney, who's known me long enough to tell me when I'm being proud instead of prudent. We outlined contingencies, not to punish, to prevent the kind of pressure that turns grief into opportunism. I did not change the will that day, but I moved the pen closer to that line. In late autumn, Michael's business hit a tight month. He did not say so, but I know the smell of cash flow strained the way a roofer knows rain. I saw the timing on his vendor payments, the way he asked about parts returns, the way he talked about a remodel they agreed to that ran over because 3 change orders turned into 7. Jennifer's words about bigger houses got louder as their savings got thinner. Pressure seeks the easiest outlet. In this case, the valve was my deed. Jennifer began piloting the idea of stewardship. She said it the way people say legacy at fundraisers. She held court at my dining table about keeping the family home in the family while staring straight through me, as if I were the interim manager of a franchise she planned to run better. She drafted chore charts for Michael and the kids that listed tasks inside my walls. It looked like help. It read like a schedule of replacement. Invitations to family events arrived with footnotes. Come for dessert, not dinner. Park on the street so we can use the driveway. Bring the children's stockings to our place so Sana doesn't get confused. I smiled and complied until compliance felt like consent. You learn as a tradesman that small leaks do more damage than dramatic bursts. This was a slow ceiling stain blooming in the corner where 2 relationships meet. Before Thanksgiving, a realtor named Dan arrived with a pumpkin pie and a market analysis printed on thick paper. That smelled like toner and confidence. Jennifer introduced him as a friend. He complimented the wainscoting, then told me the best return would come from listing in January, when buyers resolved to change their lives. I thanked him for the pie and asked him which buyers resolved to change their elders. He laughed. Jennifer did not. Michael tried to keep the peace by making every suggestion sound like my idea. Maybe the downstairs bedroom would be more convenient. Maybe a stair lift is worth considering. Maybe we hold Christmas here to take the burden off you. In his mouth, the words came out soft. In practice, they landed like furniture being slid across hardwood. You can pretend the floor is fine, but you still hear what you're doing to it. I walked the property line the first Sunday of Advent, measuring not distance, but conviction. The big maple still threw a net of shadow across the yard at 4 in the afternoon. Catherine's rose canes were tied up neat. the way she liked them before frost. I told her out loud that I was not going to be negotiated out of the last place. Her perfume still seems to live on humid days. A man talking to his dead wife in a yard looks like sorrow. It is also resolved that the week before Christmas, Jennifer began staging the house as if buyers were already booking showings. She swapped my quilts for neutrals, boxed the family photos under the premise of refreshing, and replaced the Nativity Catherine, arranged every year with a minimalist wooden set that looked like it belonged in an airport gift shop. She insisted. It was all temporary. Temporary is a bridge word people use right before permanent. I tested my strength in small ways. I moved Catherine's nativity back and watched to see who moved it again. I put the pantry growth door jamb back on its hinges. After Jennifer suggested the kitchen would feel larger without it, I rehung the photograph of our first day in the house. Each little restoration was a reminder to myself that ownership is not a sentiment. It is a responsibility carried out in actions, not apologies, because I know how to plan an installation. I also planned an exit, just in case. I toured a senior community on the other side of town without telling anyone, asked about the workshop, checked the water pressure in the units because I cannot help myself. I could live there if I chose. That mattered. Choice is dignity. You do not realize how valuable that is until someone starts drafting your decisions for you. My sisters called with weather reports on the storm racing down from the lakes and with warnings about holiday fights that begin over ham glaze and end over headstones. They told me to keep my voice low and my backbone straight. You cannot do both forever, they said. At some point, a man has to decide which one he wants to save. On the 23rd, Michael arrived alone with a box of old ornaments he'd found in their garage. He said the children wanted to hang them on my tree. I asked what time they would come by. He looked at his shoes. Jennifer has a schedule, he said. The children were booked with her parents. A schedule is a wall made of paper. It looks I sharpened 2 pencils that night and wrote 3 letters in my careful block print. One to each of my daughters, explaining what I would and would not accept in the name of family unity. One to Michael that did not accuse, only described. Description is the kindest mirror a man can offer another. I tucked the letters in the desk drawer, next to the folder marked property and the small tin where Catherine kept spare buttons, and by Christmas Eve morning, the house looked like a catalog and felt like a waiting room. I could hear the clink of stemware Jennifer polished for guests I had not invited. I could hear Michael's voice trying to be everywhere at once. I could hear my own patience counting backwards from 10, like a man diffusing a line charged with too much pressure. This is how the quiet parts of a life end. Not with shouting. With a door you paid for opening to rules you never agreed to follow. I put on the blue sweater Catherine knit in a winter when money was tight and love was not. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened. Then I did what I have done my whole life when a system heats up and threatens to burst. I put my hand on the shutoff and reminded myself I know where every valve is. The rest, as they say, is what you already wrote the night the ultimatum landed on my dinner table like a poorly installed chandelier. If you want, I can keep going straight into the next chapter beats that follow your script, or weave in even more pre-Christmas micro scenes. Your call. She'd say things like, Arthur, that roof is going to need replacing soon. That's a $20,000 job. Wouldn't it be easier to just sell the house and let someone else deal with these big expenses? Asterisk Jennifer also started making rules about my access to Michael and their children. She'd schedule family events at times when she knew I couldn't attend, or she'd change plans at the last minute without telling me. Asterisk, when I'd call Michael to ask about family gatherings, Jennifer would answer the phone and say, Oh, Arthur, we're keeping it small this time, or the kids are so busy with activities, maybe next time. Asterisk, I started to realize that Jennifer saw me as an obstacle to her plans for the future. She wanted my house, but she didn't want me in it. She was trying to push me out through manipulation and social pressure. Asterisk, Michael was caught in the middle, but he consistently chose to avoid conflict with Jennifer rather than stand up for his father. When I'd complain about Jennifer's behavior, Michael would say, "Dad, she's just trying to help. She worries about you living alone in such a big house." Asterisk, but I knew. Jennifer wasn't worried about me. She was worried about her own future. She wanted to inherit my house while I was still alive, and she was willing to make my life miserable until I gave in to her demands. Asterisk, it didn't start with a demand. It started with help. A casserole first, then a clipboard. She began with helpful. Little lists taped to my fridge filters to change, shrubs to trim, a dentist I should see because older gums need attention. Each list ended with a neat, polite suggestion that I consider simplifying things. Downsizing was always an afterthought, written small, like a footnote that somehow swallowed the whole page. She learned my routines. Tuesdays at the supply house. Thursdays at the diner with the old union guys. Saturdays in the workshop. On Tuesdays, a real estate postcard would appear in my mail pile. On Thursdays, she'd text Michael that I'd seemed tired at lunch. On Saturdays, she'd swing by with the kids and stage a scene, let them tear through the living room, and then sigh over how cramped their place felt, how much easier life would be if they were closer to a good school district. The school district, of course, was mine. When she visited, she never sat. She audited. Thermostat, mail, pantry, medications. She'd set the thermostat 3 degrees lower, then mention how heat bills get away from people. She'd fish the RRP flyers from my mail like they were evidence. She'd rotate my pill organizer so Monday sat under Friday and, a week later, remind Michael that I'd mixed up my doses. It was never an accusation, just concern, always concern. Served lukewarm and constant. Little things began to go missing and reappear where I'd never leave them. Truck keys tucked under the sink. The remote jammed in the linen closet. The water bills stacked in the freezer drawer. Each rediscovery was another note in her running commentary about how big houses are hard on the memory. She said it to neighbors. She said it to the grandkids. Mostly, she said it to Michael. Friends of hers started dropping by under soft pretenses. A hygienist from her gym who happened to be married to a home inspector. APT, a friend whose brother was a financial planner who specializes in easing transitions for seniors. Then a smiling woman who ran an independent living community that did complimentary lunch and tours. They arrived with glossy folders, bellies full of easy answers, heads tilting at the exact angle people use when they've decided what you need before you speak. On one Saturday, she organized a family clear out for me unasked. I came in from the workshop to find my attic open, boxes hauled down, labels half torn off. She called it decluttering. I called it touching Catherine's Christmas boxes without permission. She laughed it off as nostalgia getting in the way of progress and walked past me with a stack of ornaments we bought the year Michael turned 10. Later, I found the donation receipt on the counter, already signed in her handwriting. My name, her pen. Language shifted in the house, like furniture quietly moved at night. She began calling rooms by different names. The den became the playroom. The office became the guest suite. The workshop became storage. When I corrected her, she blinked as if I'd misheard. Then she brought wide rolls of blue painter's tape and stuck fresh labels on boxes. Future move? Estate papers, kitchen like she was practicing for a day she'd already penciled in. Even the calendar changed. It's tricks. A weekend barbecue I'd hosted for 30 years somehow ended up as a brunch at their place same date. Same purpose, just without my grill or my say. The church raffle I ran became their fundraiser. The sign-up sheet true to tradition, except My name missing from the committee list. She called it streamlining. I called it erasing. I started keeping a notebook, dates, times, the exact phrasing of her suggestions. Who was present? What help arrived? A plumber's ledger for people problems. It made me feel sane to see the pattern written down. The soft push, the witnessing friend, the follow-up text to Michael, the postscript about how hard I work to keep up. Patterns are how you find leaks nobody else can. The safety concern campaign kicked off with a smoke detector test I didn't authorize. She brought 2 guys in matching polos who said they were there to service the system. No appointment, no call. When I asked to see the work order, she waved a brochure about a home watch program that alerts families if seniors fall. By dinner, she told Michael I refused basic safety upgrades. That night, my doorbell camera, a new one I installed myself, caught her unscrewing a porch bulb and then texting that my lighting was inadequate. She practiced patience in public and pressure in private. In front of people, she put a hand on my elbow and praised my independence. Alone, she placed brochures in a tidy fan across my kitchen table so the community pool photos nearly covered my utility bills. She said budgets are clearer when you simplify. I said budgets are clearer when people stop spending your money in their heads. There was a dry run for power of attorney. She brought a thick packet in a cheerful folder and said streamlining paperwork would save everyone stress later. She'd even highlighted where I should sign and included sticky notes like little lighthouses. I slid the whole thing back without a word and watched the lighthouse glue pull fibers from the page. The folder closed like a mouth biting its tongue. Next came the rumors, dressed as kindness. A neighbor repeated that she'd heard I'd wandered during a walk, couldn't find my way home. I've walked the block since, mixing and could tell you which maples got blight in '89. Another neighbor asked if I still drove at night, because someone was worried. Someone never had a name, but someone always matched Jennifer's concerns from the week before. When concern didn't accelerate the timeline, she tried comfort. She planned a family night at one of those resort-style senior communities, free dinner, holiday lights, cocoa with marshmallows. The grandkids loved the clubhouse. She made sure they did. As we left, a representative pressed a gift bag into my hands with a branded blanket and a laminated sheet of floor plans. Back in my kitchen, she spread those plans over my actual table and pointed out which unit would be nearest the clubhouse so they could visit daily. She always said could. She always meant would not. Even the business wasn't off limits. She began asking Michael why he still kept some of my old commercial accounts that required weekend calls. If he sold the tough jobs, he could be home more. And wouldn't I want that for him? He came to me with that like it was his idea. I kept a straight face and asked him who benefits when you sell your hardest work, the customer, the company, or the person who doesn't like the hours. She tried. Staging 2. I came home from morning coffee to find throw pillows I didn't own on the couch. I did. 3 fake plants standing at attention, a fruit bowl with plastic lemons arranged by size. She called it refreshing the space. I asked when we were showing. She smiled and said it never hurts to be ready. When she realized I wasn't moving, she tried moving the goalposts. Family group texts began without me. Photos of events I must have gotten the invite for never arrived. Michael's tone became the tone people use when they are tired of being between 2 walls that keep leaning in. He asked me to be patient. I asked him to be present. Through all of it, I kept the house running like a well-built system. Filters changed, valves snugged, hedges squared, receipts stapled into my ledger. Routine is a defense too. If a person is steady, it makes the pushers look worse in the daylight. By the time August rolled in heavy as a wet towel, I'd mapped her playbook. Question capacity, gather all ice, introduce professionals, perform. Concern, convert space, spread whispers, offer convenient solutions, suggest paperwork, repeat. The pressure wasn't loud. It was relentless. And it was working on Michael, which was the point. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I tightened my own bolts, instead added cameras, locked the workshop, moved Catherine's boxes to storage I rented quietly, set a hold on important mail, spoke with my attorney about title, beneficiaries, and the magic phrase revocable. Living trust. If someone wanted to treat me like I was fading, they could do it while I was very busy sharpening my edges. When September came, so did a realtor in heels that hated my walkway. She introduced herself as a friend just popping by to admire the old colonial. She admired it so thoroughly she measured 3 rooms with her eyes and told me, without asking, what a cash buyer would pay before winter. I nodded, wrote the number in my notebook, and underlined it twice. Not for her. For me. Because if people were going to talk about my house like it was already theirs, then I needed to remember exactly whose signature would matter if that day ever came. The manipulation began softly, like a drip you don't hear until the ceiling. Stains. By the holidays, the stain would be a map, and everyone would pretend they hadn't been watching the spread. I had no intention of letting that ceiling fall on me. Not without choosing which wall went first. Last summer, Jennifer's manipulation reached a new level. She started telling people in our community that I was struggling to maintain my house, and that the family was concerned about my ability to live independently. I heard from neighbors that Jennifer had been asking them to keep an eye on Arthur because he was getting forgetful and might need help with basic tasks. She was spreading rumors about my mental capacity to build support for her campaign to get me out of my house. Jennifer also started bringing real estate agents to visit me, claiming they were friends who just happened to be in the neighborhood. These agents would comment on how much my house was worth and suggest that I could cash out and move somewhere more manageable. The final straw came in November when Jennifer announced that she and Michael were planning to host Christmas dinner at my house. She said it would be easier for everyone if the celebration was at the big house, and that I could help by staying out of the way while she organized everything. Jennifer wanted to use my house for Christmas, but treat me like a guest in my own home. She made it clear that she'd be in charge of the menu, the decorations, and the guest list. I was expected to provide the venue and then disappear. When I objected to Jennifer taking over my house for Christmas, she said, "Arthur, you're being selfish. This is about family, and family means making sacrifices for each other." But the only person being asked to make sacrifices was me. Michael supported Jennifer's plan, saying it would be nice to have Christmas at the family home and that I should be grateful that Jennifer was willing to do all the work of organizing the celebration. That's when I realized that Michael had completely bought into Jennifer's narrative that I was a burden who should be grateful for any attention from my own family. Asterisk. It stopped being hints and started being pressured. First came the anonymous complaints. A letter from the HOA about lawn height when the mower tracks were still visible. A note stuffed under my doormat about a porch light being out on 3 consecutive evenings. A city inspector who just happened to be driving by when the contractor Jennifer invited was measuring my kitchen and writing down load-bearing walls. None of it was catastrophic. All of it created a file on me that didn't exist before. Scheduling got weaponized next. Family plans began arriving as fate's accomplice. A birthday dinner for the grandkids moved to their side of town at the last minute, conveniently overlapping with my cardiology appointment she already knew about. A Sunday brunch that had been mine to host since the Clinton years quietly relocated to her sister's place. Then came the text telling me everyone understood if travel was too hard at my age. I was welcome to drop by early with dessert. Bring the dessert, skip the people. She turned access into a privilege she granted. My spare key disappeared from its hook. I found it later in her glove box when she asked me to grab a tote from the trunk. The workshop door, once sacrosanct, was propped open during one of her decluttering ambushes while a friend with a handheld scanner inventoried my tools under the guise of helping me insure them. I changed the locks the next morning and emailed a short note. No unannounced visitors, no third parties, no paperwork left behind. Boundaries plain as a plumb line. The retaliation arrived dressed as concern. A wellness check from Adult Protective Services because someone reported forgetfulness and possible self-neglect. The caseworker walked through, admired the labeled breaker panel in the tidy pill organizer, and closed the file in 15 minutes. I offered her coffee. She said she wished every house she visited was this boring. 2 hours later, Michael called, repeating phrases I'd already heard from Jennifer. Words like safety, transition, and doing what's best for everyone. She tested the neighborhood story, too. On the block, Facebook group one never joined. She posted a cheerful update about helping an elderly relative explore next chapter living and asked for recommendations. Neighbors I've shoveled out of snowdrifts for 30 winters began dropping pamphlets into my mailbox the way people drop coins into a jar. Every brochure went into a file on my desk labeled with the date and the method it arrived. Housekeeping for a different kind of leak. Thanksgiving was the trial run for taking my space while leaving me out. The family potluck, my turkey, my carving board, my backyard fire after dessert was suddenly a sit-down evening at their place because she felt inspired to do a formal table. I delivered pies to her counter at noon, then spent the afternoon watching my own dining room windows from the sidewalk while a rental van I didn't hire pulled up with chafers and place settings. Later, Michael stopped by alone with a plate, wrapped in foil and a message folded between the napkins. After the holidays, we should talk about listing in the spring. He said it like weather. I answered like a forecast isn't a decree. She escalated to professionals with name tags. A financial planner who specializes in simplifying portfolios for seniors. A senior move manager with a cheerful tape gun and a pre-printed schedule that started with memorabilia and ended with estate documents. A realtor who swore she wasn't here in any official capacity, but managed to tell me the exact cash number. A buyer would pay if I could be out within 60 days. I walked each one to the door. I kept their cards. I added dates to the notebook. The house itself became a battlefield of petty edits. My thermostat kept sliding 3 degrees lower. A framed photo of Catherine migrated from the hallway to a guest room, then into a box marked Misc Seasonal. 3 of my good chisels went missing until I found them in the trunk of Michael's SUV, under a bag of wrapping paper borrowed for a school project, he said, meaning he hadn't known they were there until she needed a proof he was keeping me safe from myself. I took the chisels back and put them where they belong. Muscle memory is a kind of ownership. She tried to turn the business into leverage. Why keep the grueling commercial maintenance contracts, she asked him, when he could sell that part of the book and be home for dinner? He echoed it to me in a late-night call that sounded less like a question than a plea not to argue. I asked him who benefits when you sell the hardest work. He didn't answer, and the silence said he finally understood the problem wasn't the contracts. When the soft moves didn't produce the results she wanted, she shifted to public choreography. A family meeting at my kitchen table that included a realtor, a planner, and a woman from a community with a saltwater pool. She opened a binder like a schoolteacher and assigned parts. Michael would handle utilities. She would manage change of address. I would select which mementos came with me. I closed the binder and slid it back across the table. The meeting ended without raised voices because I kept mine level and repeated the only sentence that mattered. I'm not moving. The next morning, an honest morning, HOA violation appeared for a hedge allegedly exceeding height. I trimmed it to a level I could measure with a square and sent the office a photo with a date, stamp, and a note requesting the name of the complainant for my records. The office replied that complaints are confidential. I replied that compliance is documented. I wasn't playing hide and seek. I was building a timeline. Meanwhile, invitations to see the grandkids arrived with strings. Stop by after 6, but before 7 because bedtime is firm. Don't bring sweets because we're avoiding sugar. Leave by 8 because they need a calm routine. Love with conditions is still love, but it isn't welcome. I showed up on time, brought books instead of cookies, and read 3 chapters in. A voice steady enough to outlast anybody's rules. By early December, the conflict wasn't ambient anymore. It was structural. She announced, not asked, that Christmas dinner would be at my house because it was better for large parties, that she would handle the guest list and the menu, and that I could help by staying out of the kitchen and letting professionals handle things. She used my rooms like props and my memories like wallpaper she intended to paint over. I prepared the way a tradesman does, quietly and completely. I spoke with my attorney about title, trust language, and what happens when people who aren't on a deed treat a house like they are. I updated beneficiaries. I moved Catherine's most important boxes to off-site storage and kept a key in my pocket, not a hook. I put one more camera on a side door. I told Michael, calmly, that the next boundary crossed would have a consequence. That couldn't be walked back. He told me to be patient, that the season is stressful, that she means well. I told him stress doesn't move walls. It only shows where they already lean. The invitations, the rumors, the surprise experts, none of it got what she wanted. So she tried the oldest tool left, an ultimatum wrapped in holiday cheer. And that was the point where pressure turned into a choice, not hers. Mine. It kept climbing from background noise to a steady whine, the way a bad bearing sings before it ceases. Every week brought a new helpful intervention that arrived without invitation and left a paper trail pointing toward the same conclusion. I was becoming a problem other people needed to solve. The mail started telling the story Jennifer wanted told. Brochures for memory-friendly living, glossy catalogs for modular ramps, a trifold about the dignity of right-sizing, and 2 different flyers from estate liquidators who specialize in discrete transitions. None were requested. My name was spelled right, the unit number correct. A few even had handwritten notes. Thought this could be helpful. With no signature, just a smiley face where courage should have been. I kept every piece in a manila folder I labeled with a date and a single word. Narrative. Phones joined. The chorus. The bank manager called to confirm. I wanted to add a joint signer to my primary account. I did not. The name given was Michael's, but the email address on the request wasn't his. I asked him point blank. He swore he hadn't been to the branch. Later, he admitted Jennifer might have asked about the process. The manager tried to be diplomatic, but I've read faces longer than I've read contracts. He saw the situation for what it was, a test balloon. I thanked him for calling me first, then did what plumbers do when a valve looks suspicious. I closed it. 2-factor authentication. New passwords. A face-to-face meeting with the branch to put a big red note on my file. No changes without my live signature. At the pharmacy. The clerk asked if I'd like to enroll in an automated medication service where a third party would prepackage my pills by date and time because someone named Jennifer signed me up online. I smiled and told her I'm perfectly capable of sorting 7 days into 7 little boxes without a subscription. She laughed. The way people do when they're relieved, the person in front of them can still laugh at the right time. Errands turned. Odd. One afternoon, a pair of men in a van pulled into the driveway wearing polo shirts with a key and lock logo. They were here, they said, to upgrade the deadbolts as part of a senior safety program coordinated by the family. They had the right address and an order number printed on a clipboard. They did not, however, have a work order with my signature. It became a polite standoff on the porch. They were just doing their job. So was I. I told them if they touched a single hinge, I would call the police and then the licensing board. They apologized and left. I took photos of their plates, a habit that used to belong to the job site and now belongs to any day that doesn't feel quite honest. Grocery store aisles started carrying commentary. Someone I've known since his kids were in Little League asked how I was adjusting to the idea of community living. I said I adjust thermostats and expectations, not my address, unless I choose to. He colored a bit and said he'd heard there was a timeline. I asked whose. He didn't know exactly. People rarely do when the rumor mill runs on other people's gas. The church, which for most of my life respected quiet as a virtue, began inserting advice into prayer requests. A deacon Goodman, earnest as a hymn, pulled me aside after service and suggested the church could help facilitate a move. I asked him what that meant. He said there was a committee now. There is always a committee when people want responsibility, without skin in the game. He said Jennifer had expressed concern about my isolation, which is an interesting word to use about a man invited to 3 breakfast and 2 poker nights a week. I told him my calendar was full and my mind was mine. He swallowed, nodded, and said he'd relay my preferences to the group. I assured him there was no group that would be making decisions for me. Even the thermostat became a thesis. It kept finding its way down a few degrees when nobody but me should have been touching it. I bought a locking cover, the same clear, plastic kind I used to put on thermostats in rental units when I was a landlord, and set it to the temperature my joints prefer. First afternoon it was on the wall. I heard a soft laugh from Jennifer when she walked by. That looks institutional, she said. So does taking what isn't yours, I replied. She didn't laugh after that. We stood there in a hallway. Dad had seen every first day of school photo we ever took. 2 adults who would have been better served by saying please and thank you. She walked away. I wrote down the date. Text messages learned to arrive at inconvenient times. Hey there. Can you meet the downsizing coach at noon? No name, no number, no ask, just instructions, as if I joined a play for which I never auditioned. I responded with a sentence that became my template. I don't schedule vendors I didn't hire. If someone knocks, I will not be opening the door. The coach left a pamphlet under the mat anyway. I added it to the narrative folder. The kids weren't left out of the campaign. Grandpa, one of the little ones said one Saturday, "Are you moving to the place with the pool?" It wasn't a question born of imagination. It was a script she'd been hearing read to her. I showed her the birdhouse we'd been working on and told her the only place I'm moving is closer to the lemonade. She laughed. Kids will believe the last true thing they heard if you say it with your eyes. Social media, a thing I do not personally subscribe to, but which has a way of spilling into real life, started working as an amplifier. A photo of my front steps ended up online with a caption about charming, but a fall waiting to happen. The handrail I'd installed was straight, the tread square. The only thing slippery was the implication. A neighbor printed the photo and brought it by, worried I'd be hurt by it. I thanked her and told her I'd be more hurt by pretending it wasn't intentional. Then I did what the post wanted me to do, but on my terms. I installed another rail for the other side because symmetry pleases me. I sent the neighbor home with cookies and a note. Concern is welcome. Control is not. Thanksgiving sat in the middle of it like a test. The plan that had lived for decades, potluck at my place, children running between rooms, someone forgetting the roles until the last minute morphed into an email string I wasn't copied on until someone forwarded it out of pity. The dinner had been relocated to their house for ease. My contributions were listed as optional. I made the pies anyway, delivered them to the right door, and went home. That night, Michael stopped by with a plate wrapped in foil, and a look like a man who sees the slope he's on. "It was easier this way," he said. A sentence that always means someone else did the hard part for you. "For who?" I asked. He didn't answer. The plate was heavy with turkey and light on apology. I ate every bite. Then I wrote the word ease on an index card and pinned it under the one that says, "Dignity is a habit." There were smaller, pettier things that would sound paranoid if I hadn't trained myself to recognize patterns. The garage remote migrated to my sock drawer. The main water shut-off handle painted blue since Carter looked like someone had scratched at it with a tool to make it appear corroded. A stack of tax documents I'd set on the desk walked to the freezer and sat next to the ice cream. That last one would be funny if it weren't proof of the playbook. Create the evidence you plan to cite later. Adult Protective Services rang the bell one Wednesday after lunch. The worker, a woman with sensible shoes and a kindness she didn't have to perform, said they'd received an anonymous call. "We do this a lot," she said, hands open in a peace offering. "Sometimes it's real. Sometimes it's perspective." I showed her the pantry, the workshop, the label breakers, the calendar with dental appointments written in my block print. I told her I appreciate a system that checks on people. I also told her I don't appreciate systems that let anyone with a grudge weaponize concern. She smiled, professional and human. "I wish every visit went like this," she said, closing her tablet. Before she left, I asked if the report mentioned who called. She said it didn't. Of course it didn't. Responsibility likes a costume. Week later, a different doorbell. A senior move specialist with a tape gun dangling from her wrist like jewelry. "We can finish a whole house in 3 days," she said, the way someone might brag about a magic trick. "Kitchen first, drawers, then cabinets." I told her the kitchen is a covenant, not a checklist, and if anyone was going to touch Catherine's favorite mixing bowl, it was going to be someone who knew why the chip on the rim matters. She blinked slowly, as if I'd spoken a language she'd heard about but never learned, and left me a business card anyway. "When you're ready," she said. I added the card to the stack and wrote 3 days in the margin with a question mark that was really a full stop. Money wormed into conversations Michael and I used to keep clean. He started talking about equity events, like a man who'd been reading the kind of blogs that make people anxious and vendors happy. "If you sold now, you captured top dollar," he said, as if my life were a graph. I told him roofs and relationships aren't captured, they're maintained. Later that week, he brought me a spreadsheet, his numbers in one column, my house in another. He'd done the math like an engineer and missed the math that matters. I slid the paper back and said, "You're not wrong about arithmetic. You're just wrong about the problem we're solving." Her parents got involved with a kind of diplomacy that smells like furniture polish. They came by with a casserole, which is how Midwesterners apologize, and also how they announce they're about to step over a line. Her father, a man who's never met a sentence he couldn't turn into a lecture, told me the market was frothy and that he'd hate to see me leave money on the table. I told him I didn't eat at tables where people took other people's plates. He laughed like we were having the same conversation. We weren't. On a Tuesday, a home safety assessment showed up in my email with my name typed above a list of areas of concern. The concerns were inventive. Rugs present trip hazards. The rug in question is taped on all 4 sides because I hate drift. Lighting inconsistent. I counted 8 functioning bulbs in the hall where someone had unscrewed one as evidence. Kitchen knives accessible. I almost applauded that one for creativity. Yes, I keep the knives where I can cook. The assessment ended with a recommendation. Consider transition within 90 days. I printed it, circled the word consider, and wrote in the margin, considered, declined. I put it with the rest. Then came the family council. It was a Sunday, which is a day I prefer to leave unbroken. They set it for 3 p.m. which is when football keeps most men compliant. Her parents were there. A realtor friend I'd met exactly twice. A woman who runs a place with a saltwater pool and the kind of lobby that smells like citrus and freshly printed newsletters. Michael, Jennifer, with a binder, tabbed. I stood at my own kitchen counter and watched a performance in my kitchen. She opened with a prepared statement about legacy stewardship. It was a nice phrase, like calling a forced march a scenic route. She gave everyone roles. I was assigned keepsakes coordinator, a title that makes war with the word father. I closed the binder gently and slid it back. There will be no counsel, I said. There will be a conversation if we remember I am not a topic. Silence does good work when you let it. The realtor looked at the saltwater woman. The saltwater woman looked at her lap. Michael looked at me. Jennifer looked at the place where she wanted the plan to be. I made coffee for everyone because coffee means we're still people, not positions. I did not hand them cups. They poured their own or they went without. The retaliation took a new angle. The "we're so worried" email. It went to my daughters, my sisters, my pastor, 2 neighbors, and by accident or by design to the youth soccer coach who once helped me drag my trash bin when I had a sprain. It itemized incidents, each one a half-true story dressed in concern. Missed doctor appointment. It had been rescheduled because the office called and moved it. Wrong day for trash. The city changed the pickup without telling anyone. Our whole street had it wrong. Confusion about bills. I tested the autopay with a small account and then turned it off when the bank tried to encourage me to put everything on it. My eldest forwarded me the email with a single line. "Do you want me to respond?" "No," I wrote back. "Not yet." Instead, I sent my own email to the same list attaching copies of the reschedule notice, the city's flyer, and a screenshot of my online bill pay with the green paid check marks. Then I wrote 2 sentences that felt like a hinge. I do not require a guardian. I require my choices to be respected. Time turned toward December, and the holiday machinery made people understand. Weather charts on the fridge, salt buckets by the door, lists that get longer when the light gets shorter. The decor decisions started early. My old nativity, the one Catherine set up with the chipped shepherd she always tucked facing the back because his nose fell off in '85, went missing. In its place, the sort of tasteful arrangement that looks like an advertisement for humility instead of the thing itself. I found the box for hours in the attic under a bag labeled "Misc Seasonal," which is a phrase people use when they do not love the contents. I set it back up on the sideboard, nose-less shepherd and all, and said aloud to the empty room, "We are not doing this." I watched it for 3 days. It stayed. Some lines draw themselves if you hold the pen long enough. Vendors kept appearing as if they'd been assigned. Slots on a schedule somewhere I hadn't agreed to. A roofer with a drone who wanted to. Scan for hail impacts. An HVAC technician who said he had a courtesy appointment to talk about upgrading to smart controls. And a handyman with a camera who offered a free photo set for your listing. I treated each one the way I taught new apprentices to treat flooded basements. Power off first, then speak. Who hired you? If the answer was any name other than mine, the conversation ended. Do you have a written work order? If the answer was no, the conversation ended. Do you understand that stepping onto my property after I've told you to leave constitutes trespass? At that point, the conversation ended itself. The thermostat company called to confirm a change to my account email. It wasn't my email. The utility requested consent to add a second login for family monitoring. I told them I am not a meter that needs watching. The post office left a pink slip for a change of address request I had not filed. The clerk at the station knows me from years of buying stamps for scholarship thank you letters. She saved it, bless her, and made me sign a form to deny it. She said I wouldn't believe how often helpers try to move people by moving their mail. I told her I do believe it. I wish I didn't. Business bled, as it inevitably does, into personal. A longtime commercial client called to ask if the service level would change now that the company is under new leadership. I told him leadership isn't a chair, it's a set of decisions. He said he heard a rumor I'd retired from being able to decide. It was a clumsy sentence doing emotional work it had no training for. I told him rumors are free because they aren't worth anything. He laughed like men laugh when they've said the wrong thing to the wrong person and are grateful for the kindness not to be made into a lesson. A week before the 24th, I started receiving packages I did not order. A bath bench, a set of grippy socks, a talking pill reminder that chirped like a bird being punished. I returned each unopened and took a photo of the return label with the tracking number visible. Amazon's chat asked my reason. Accidental order. I typed, not accidental, unwanted. It felt good to use the right word. Too often age hands you a dictionary of euphemisms and dares you to tell the truth with it. I called a family meeting myself, but not to negotiate. The agenda was 2 items, and I wrote it on the whiteboard in the kitchen because Sharpie on whiteboard is hard to ignore and even harder to forget. Item 1, access. Item 2, representation. Access meant no key without express permission, no code sharing, no entering when I wasn't home. Representation meant no one speaks for me to vendors, doctors, banks, churches, neighbors, or the internet. I read both items out loud. I asked for questions. Jennifer had many, all of which were arguments disguised as seeking clarity. Michael had one. What if there's an emergency? Then you call me, I said. And if I don't answer, you call 911. We will not be inventing special rules for a crisis that hasn't happened. I taped the agenda to the fridge and the inside of the front hall closet door, just because I could. People are only trying to help, the refrain went, as if repetition would turn it into scripture. Help is not a battering ram. Help knocks and waits to be welcomed in. Help can be declined without needing a defense. A man ought to be able to live a life where help is not a Trojan horse. The neighbors began choosing sides without meaning to. Mrs. Patterson next door started bringing casseroles unannounced again, a throwback to when Catherine was sick, and any bit of warm food felt like something we could control. Across the street, a young couple whose dog loves my lawn asked if they could shovel my walk during the next storm, just to be safe. I let them, because refusing kindness is not the same as refusing control. They left a note under the doormat. We like living near you. Also, your maple is the best one on the block. I wrote them back on an index card. Kindness accepted. Maple agrees. Inside the house, the smallest things started to matter like plumb and level. I moved my keys to a bowl with a lid and a note. Keys live here. I put my remote on a hook by the TV and labeled it. I took a photo of each, printed them, and taped them inside the cabinet door above the coffee filters. If an item got lost, I could open a door and point to the photograph. Not a memory problem, I'd say, like a teacher with a lesson plan. A boundary problem. Things stopped walking after that. Or, if they did, they walked back before I could catch them out of place. Finances got the same treatment. I wrote out a 1-page summary of accounts, beneficiaries, and passwords, put it in a sealed envelope, and placed it in my attorney's fireproof box with instructions for who gets it, when, and why. The first person who should have been on that list wasn't anymore. It is a hard sentence to write, but it is a sentence that saves other people from the grief of guessing. I did not make a public show of it. I made a legal one. Paper knows what people forget. A few days before the holiday, I watched a realtor's car slow roll past the house twice within an hour. I recognized the face from the pumpkin pie day. He looked at the house the way a contractor looks at an unfinished basement, like a project. He can't wait to start. I stepped onto the porch with a mug and met his eyes. He waved sheepishly and drove on. That night, I installed a small sign at the base of the walkway. No solicitation, no surveys, no photos. It didn't stop the cameras in phones. Nothing does. But it told the truth out loud where everyone could see it. There were attempts. At charm, too. A tin of cookies with the best grandpa on the lid in a script that looked like a stock font from a craft site. A note from Jennifer about how much she admires my independence. The same sentence that has been used to dismiss women for centuries, doing double duty now to corral an old man. She invited me to a holiday lights tour at a senior community that included Coco and carols. I have nothing against Coco. I do not sing carols with people who introduce themselves by measuring my living room with their eyes. This is the part of the story where someone usually says they lost their temper. I didn't. I tightened it, like a slip joint that doesn't need Teflon if you know the feel. I lowered my voice when there's rows. I wrote letters instead of speeches. I kept my hands busy, fixed the sticking window, replaced a wax ring on a toilet that had been sweating since summer, re-oiled the hinges on the door to my office that Catherine used to slam when supper was late because I'd gotten lost in a diagram of a hydronic line. Working with my hands kept me from making a mess. I couldn't mop the day before everything came to a head. A box arrived addressed to the Donovan family household. Inside was a set of place cards, gold-edged, with names pre-printed in someone else's hand. It was a small thing that said a big thing. This table belongs to us now. I picked up the card with my name and put it in my pocket. The rest I set back in the box. I kept my seat, if only in my wallet, for exactly as long as it took to decide where I'd sit for real. The pressure didn't stop. It never does on its own. People assume these stories break because of one big blow. In my experience, they end because one person finally refuses to turn the wrench another quarter turn past what the threads can bear. That's all I did. I recognized the torque. I knew the sound a fitting makes before it cracks. I took the wrench out of someone else's hand. And here is the part I won't pretty up. There was a cost. There always is when you prioritize self-respect over someone else's comfort. The grandchildren saw less of me for a stretch because the schedule was used like a gate. Some neighbors believed the narrative because narratives are free and evidence takes time. The church committee hurt, not because of what they offered, but because of what it assumed. Michael's voice got thin, flat as a man walking a balance beam he did not choose to climb onto. All of that is true. And this is also true. The cost of continuing would have been higher paid in smaller coins over a longer time. The sort of debt you don't realize you've incurred until a collector you've never met is standing in your kitchen telling you, your name is misspelled on your own mail got, so I did the thing that made all the other things line up. I called my attorney. I added a sentence to my trust that reads, in essence, anyone who uses coercion, undue influence, or public campaigns to force my hand will disqualify themselves from any benefit. I wrote a letter to accompany it, not angry, just math. If you respect my decisions, you will still be invited to participate in my generosity. If you attempt to replace my decisions with yours, you will be replaced in my documents by those who didn't. I sent a copy to exactly 2 people and put the signed original where it belongs. Then I did 3 practical things that felt small and turned out to be the spine that held the rest upright. I moved Catherine's keepsakes to a storage unit in my name with autopay set from a separate account no one else has ever touched. I hired a handyman I trust to change out a few interior locks, not because I feared a break-in, but because I needed the feel of a new key in a new cylinder as a tactile reminder that my life still takes its shape from my choices. And I wrote a 1-sentence note and taped it inside the pantry door above the pencil marks of my kids' heights. This home answers to the person who lives here. That is where the section ends for me, not with a slam, but with a click of tumblers as A lock settles into a position it should have been in all along. The next part, the stage smiles, the table, the wine poured like it's a lubricant for other people's plans, belongs to a holiday with a script I refuse to follow. But before that night pulled me to a decision, the conflict had already told me who I was. Not a problem to be solved. Not a project to be managed. A man with a set of tools he knows how to use, including the most important one, the word no, said gently, precisely, and for as long as required. Christmas Eve arrived, and Jennifer had transformed my house into her vision of the perfect holiday celebration. She'd rearranged my furniture, replaced Catherine's Christmas decorations with her own, and set up the dining room like she was hosting a dinner party. I felt like a stranger in my own home. Jennifer directed me to sit in the corner while she played hostess, and she made it clear that I was expected to be grateful for being included in Christmas dinner in my own house. The breaking point came during dinner when Jennifer started talking about her plans for the house. She said, "Arthur, Michael and I have been thinking about the future. This house is really too much for you to handle, and we'd love to take it off your hands." Jennifer continued, "We can move in and take care of the maintenance, and you could move into a nice senior community where you'd have people your own age to socialize with. It would be better for everyone." I told Jennifer that I wasn't ready to move out of my house, and that I was still perfectly capable of taking care of myself and my property. Jennifer's response revealed her true feelings about me. She said, "Arthur, you're being stubborn and selfish. You're holding on to this house out of pride, and it's not fair to Michael and the children. They deserve to live in a nice house, and you're preventing that by refusing to be reasonable." That's when Michael delivered the ultimatum that would change everything between us. He said, "Dad, Jennifer is my wife, and she's the mother of my children. If you can't get along with her and support our plans for the future, then maybe you shouldn't come to family events anymore." I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd given my business to, the person I'd planned to leave everything to, and I realized that he'd chosen his manipulative wife over his father. I stood up from the dinner table in my own house and said, "Michael, you're absolutely right. If I'm not welcome in my own family, then my family isn't welcome to my house." Then I walked out of my own Christmas dinner and drove to my sister's house. I spent Christmas night at my sister Margaret's house, telling her what had happened. Margaret was furious with Michael and Jennifer, but she wasn't surprised. She said she'd been watching Jennifer manipulate Michael for years. Margaret said, "Arthur, Jennifer has been planning to get your house since Catherine died. She's been working on Michael, turning him against you, making him think that you're the problem. She won't stop until she gets what she wants." That night, I made the most difficult decision of my life. I called my real estate agent, Patricia Williams, and left a message asking her to come see me the day after Christmas. I told her I was ready to sell the house. Christmas morning, I woke up alone in my sister's guest room and realized that this was probably how I'd spend every Christmas for the rest of my life if I didn't take action. Michael had made his choice, and now I was going to make mine. Patricia came to see me on December 26th, and we walked through the house while Michael and Jennifer were presumably enjoying their Christmas celebrations somewhere else. Patricia said the house would sell quickly in the current market, probably for around $850,000. I told Patricia that I wanted a fast sale with a 60-day closing. I was ready to move on with my life, and I wanted Michael to understand the consequences of his Christmas Eve ultimatum. Patricia asked if I was sure about selling, given that it was the family home with so many memories. I told her that the memories were what I was taking with me. The house was just a building, and buildings could be replaced. The sale process, 18 o'clock to 22 o'clock. The house went on the market on December 28th. Within 3 days, we had 5 offers, all at or above asking price. I accepted an offer from a young family who wanted to close in 45 days and were willing to pay $875,000 cash. Michael found out about the sale when he drove by the house and saw the sold sign in the front yard. He called me immediately, panicking about what was happening. Michael said, "Dad, what's going on? Why is there a sold sign on the house? You can't sell the family home without talking to us first." I reminded Michael that it was my house, not the family house, and that I could sell it whenever I wanted. Michael begged me to reconsider, promising that he and Jennifer would be more respectful in the future. He said Jennifer had been stressed about the holidays and hadn't meant what she'd said about me moving out. But I told Michael that Jennifer had been very clear about her feelings and that he'd supported her position. I said, "Son, you told me that if I couldn't get along with Jennifer, I shouldn't come to family events. Well, I've decided that if I'm not welcome in the family, then the family isn't welcome to inherit my house." Jennifer tried to intervene, calling me and apologizing for her behavior on Christmas Eve. She claimed that she'd been drinking wine and had said things she didn't mean. But I'd been watching her manipulate Michael for 2 years. Christmas Eve was just when she finally said out loud what she'd been thinking all along. I told Jennifer that I appreciated her apology, but that actions have consequences. She'd spent 2 years trying to push me out of my house, and now she was getting exactly what she'd asked for, a future without me in it. The closing took place on February 15th, exactly 7 weeks after Michael's Christmas Eve ultimatum. I walked out of the lawyer's office with a check for $875,000 and the satisfaction of knowing that I was finally free from Jennifer's manipulation. I used part of the money to buy a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in a senior community about an hour away. It was the perfect size for me, with a workshop space and a community center where I could socialize with people who actually wanted my company. The rest of the money went into investments and charitable donations. I set up a scholarship fund at the local trade school in Catherine's memory, and I donated to organizations that help elderly people who've been abandoned by their families. Michael and Jennifer were devastated by the sale. They'd been counting on inheriting the house, and they'd made financial plans based on that expectation. Without the inheritance, they couldn't afford to buy a house in the same neighborhood where they'd planned to raise their children. Jennifer blamed me for destroying the family and punishing the grandchildren for her mistakes. But I reminded her that she was the one who'd wanted me out of the house. I'd just given her what she'd asked for. Michael tried to maintain a relationship with me, but it was strained and awkward. He'd call occasionally and suggest that we work things out, but he was never willing to acknowledge that Jennifer's behavior had been wrong or that his ultimatum had been hurtful. 6 months after the sale, Michael and Jennifer's marriage started showing signs of strain. The financial pressure of not inheriting my house, combined with the guilt and resentment from our family conflict, was taking its toll on their relationship. Jennifer had built her entire future around the assumption that she'd eventually live in my house. When that plan fell apart, she had to face the reality that she and Michael couldn't afford the lifestyle she'd been planning. Michael realized too late that he'd sacrificed his relationship with his father and his inheritance for a woman who'd manipulated him into making an impossible choice. He started to see Jennifer's behavior more clearly, but the damage was already done. I heard through mutual friends that Michael and Jennifer were having serious marital problems. The stress of losing the inheritance, combined with the guilt about how they treated me, was destroying their relationship. Meanwhile, I was thriving in my new community. I'd made friends with other residents, joined the woodworking club, and started dating a wonderful woman named Rose, who appreciated me for who I was, not what I owned. The money from the house sale had given me financial freedom and independence. I could travel, pursue hobbies, and help causes I cared about without worrying about preserving an inheritance for ungrateful children. It's been 2 years since I sold the house, and I have no regrets about my decision. Michael chose his wife over his father on Christmas Eve, and I chose my dignity over his inheritance. Michael and Jennifer eventually divorced, partly because of the stress and resentment from our family conflict. Michael lost both his wife and his inheritance because he couldn't stand up to a manipulative woman who saw me as an obstacle to her plans. The house that Jennifer wanted so badly is now home to a young family who appreciates what they have. They send me Christmas cards every year, thanking me for selling them such a beautiful home. As for me, I've learned that family relationships should be based on love and respect, not financial expectations. Michael saw me as a source of future wealth, rather than a father who deserved basic courtesy and inclusion. People sometimes ask me if I miss the family home or regret selling it so quickly. The answer is no. A house is just a building. Home is where you're loved and respected. And I found that in my new community, with people who value me for who I am. Michael learned that ultimatums work both ways. He forced me to choose between accepting disrespect and losing my family. So I chose to lose my family and keep my dignity. And in the end, he lost both his family and his inheritance. The Christmas Eve, when my son chose his wife over me, became the night I chose myself over both of them. And that choice gave me back my life. Asterisk. To understand why Michael's betrayal hurt so deeply, you need to know the history of our family and that house. Catherine and I bought it in 1975 when Michael was just 2 years old. We were young, broke, and taking a huge risk with a mortgage we could barely afford. I worked 16-hour days building my plumbing business while Catherine raised our 3 children. Every improvement to that house, the new kitchen, the finished basement, the deck, overlooking the garden, was built with my own hands during weekends and evenings. Michael grew up in that house. He took his first steps in the living room, learned to ride a bike in the driveway, and brought his prom date to meet us in the front parlor. Every major moment of his childhood happened within those walls. When Michael graduated high school, I offered to pay for his college anywhere in the country. But Michael chose to stay local and work in my business instead. He said he wanted to carry on the family tradition and eventually take over the company. I was proud that Michael wanted to follow in my footsteps, but I also made sure he understood that success required sacrifice. I taught him every aspect of the plumbing business, from basic repairs to complex commercial installations. Michael was a good student and a hard worker. By the time he was 30, he was running most of the day-to-day operations while I focused on the business side. When I retired 5 years ago, I signed the entire company over to Michael for $1. I gave Michael a business worth over $500,000 because I wanted him to have security and independence. I never asked for anything in return except that he take care of his mother and me as we aged. Asterisk. Jennifer's manipulation of Michael didn't start with my house. It started the day they got married. I watched her gradually isolate Michael from his friends, his extended family, and eventually from me. Jennifer had grown up wealthy, and she'd never understood the value of hard work or family loyalty. Her parents had given her everything she wanted, and she expected Michael to provide the same lifestyle. When Michael's plumbing business couldn't fund Jennifer's expensive tastes, she started looking for other sources of money. That's when she set her sights on my house and my assets. Jennifer would make comments about how unfair it was that I was hoarding wealth while young families like theirs struggled to get ahead. She'd say things like, "Arthur, you can't take it with you. Why not help your family while you're still alive?" But Jennifer's idea of helping the family was giving her everything she wanted while I moved into a nursing home. She wasn't interested in sharing the house or caring for me. She wanted me gone so she could take over. I started documenting Jennifer's behavior, keeping notes about her comments and demands. I wanted to have evidence of her manipulation in case Michael ever questioned my decision to cut him out of my will. Jennifer also started poisoning my grandchildren against me. She'd tell them that Grandpa was getting old and grumpy, and that they shouldn't bother him with their problems. She was systematically destroying my relationships with everyone in the family. The most painful part was watching Michael become a different person under Jennifer's influence. The son who'd once been loyal and respectful became distant and critical. He started questioning my decisions, my independence, and my right to live in my own house. Asterisk, what made Michael's betrayal even more painful was that I'd given him my business with the understanding that he'd take care of me as I aged. The plumbing company was generating about $200,000 a year in profit, which should have been enough to support both Michael's family and my needs. But Jennifer's expensive lifestyle was consuming all of Michael's income and more. She'd convinced him to take out loans against the business to pay for their house, their cars, and their children's private school tuition. Michael was working harder than ever, but had less money than when he'd been my employee. Jennifer's spending had turned a profitable business into a financial burden, and she was looking for new sources of income to maintain her lifestyle. That's why Jennifer was so determined to get my house. She needed my assets to fund her spending habits. She'd already spent Michael's inheritance from the business, and now she wanted mine from the property. I realized that if I gave in to Jennifer's demands and moved out of my house, she'd find ways to access my other assets too. She'd convince Michael that I needed help managing my money, and eventually, she'd control everything I'd worked for. The Christmas Eve ultimatum wasn't just about the house. It was about Jennifer's complete takeover of my family and my assets. Michael was too blind to see it, but I wasn't going to let it happen. Asterisk, word of my house sale spread quickly through our small community. People who'd known our family for decades were shocked that Michael would allow his wife to push his father out of the family home. My neighbors were supportive of my decision. Mrs. Patterson, who'd lived next door for 20 years, said she'd watched Jennifer's behavior and thought I was doing the right thing by standing up for myself. The pastor at our church, where Michael and I had attended together for years, tried to mediate between us. But when I explained the full situation, Jennifer's manipulation, Michael's ultimatum, and the years of disrespect, even he agreed that I'd been pushed too far. Some people in the community criticized my decision to sell the house, saying that family should forgive and forget. But these were usually people who'd never experienced the kind of systematic manipulation that Jennifer had put me through. Customers of Michael's plumbing business started asking questions about our family conflict. Some of them had known me for decades and were disappointed in Michael's treatment of his father. Michael's business started suffering as word spread about how he treated me. In a small community, reputation matters, and Michael's reputation was damaged by his abandonment of his father. Asterisk, about 6 months after I sold the house, Michael started to see Jennifer's true nature. Without the prospect of inheriting my house, Jennifer became increasingly demanding and critical of Michael's inability to provide the lifestyle she wanted. Jennifer started pressuring Michael to sell his business and move to a bigger city where he could make more money. She was tired of small-town life and wanted the kind of wealth and status that Michael's plumbing business couldn't provide. Michael finally realized that Jennifer had never loved him for who he was. She'd loved him for what she thought he could give her. When my house was no longer part of the equation, Jennifer's interest in the marriage began to fade. Michael called me one evening, sounding broken and defeated. He said, "Dad, I think I made a terrible mistake. Jennifer is talking about divorce, and I'm starting to understand what you were trying to tell me about her." I listened as Michael explained how Jennifer had been pressuring him to sell everything and start over somewhere else. She'd told him that staying in our small town was limiting his potential and that he needed to think bigger about his future. Michael said, "Dad, I realize now that Jennifer was never interested in building a life with me. She was interested in the life she thought I could give her. And when that life didn't include your house, she lost interest in me too." I felt sorry for Michael, but I also felt vindicated. I'd seen Jennifer's true nature years earlier, but Michael had been too infatuated to listen to my warnings. Michael and Jennifer's divorce was messy and expensive. Jennifer hired an aggressive attorney and fought for half of everything, including the plumbing business that I'd given to Michael. Jennifer claimed that she'd contributed to the business's success and deserved compensation for her sacrifices during their marriage. She conveniently forgot that her spending had nearly bankrupted the business. Michael's attorney contacted me, asking if I'd testify about the business transfer and Jennifer's behavior toward me. I agreed to help, not because I wanted to hurt Jennifer, but because I wanted to protect the business I'd built. During my deposition, I detailed Jennifer's years of manipulation, her attempts to get me out of my house, and her role in destroying our family relationships. The attorney was shocked by the extent of Jennifer's calculated behavior. I also provided evidence of Jennifer's spending habits and her lies about our family's financial situation. The court needed to understand that Jennifer had been living off my generosity while claiming credit for their comfortable lifestyle. The final divorce settlement gave Jennifer much less than she'd demanded. The judge was not impressed with her attempts to claim assets that had been gifts from Michael's father, and her credibility was damaged by evidence of her manipulation. After his divorce was finalized, Michael tried to rebuild our relationship. He'd call regularly, visit my new condo, and apologize repeatedly for choosing Jennifer over me. Michael said, "Dad, I know I hurt you terribly. I let Jennifer manipulate me into betraying the most important person in my life. I don't know how to make it right, but I wanted to try." I appreciated Michael's apologies, but I told him that some damage couldn't be undone. I said, "Son, you didn't just choose Jennifer over me on Christmas Eve. You chose her manipulation over your own judgment, her greed over family loyalty, and her demands over basic respect for your father." Michael asked if there was any way he could earn back my trust and possibly be included in my will again. I told him that trust had to be rebuilt slowly, through actions rather than words. I set conditions for rebuilding our relationship. Michael had to acknowledge the full extent of Jennifer's manipulation and his role in enabling it. He had to understand why I'd sold the house and accept that his inheritance was gone forever. Michael also had to prove that he'd learned from his mistakes. I wanted to see him stand up for himself, make independent decisions, and prioritize family relationships over financial gain. Rebuilding my relationship with Michael has been a slow process. We started with monthly dinners at neutral restaurants, gradually working up to him visiting my condo and me occasionally visiting his apartment. Michael has become a different person since his divorce. He's more humble, more appreciative, and more aware of how his choices affect other people. The experience of losing both his wife and his inheritance taught him valuable lessons about loyalty and respect. I've been able to rebuild relationships with my grandchildren, who are now old enough to understand what happened between their parents and me. They visit me regularly and seem to enjoy spending time with Grandpa without their mother's negative influence. Michael's plumbing business has recovered from the financial strain of his marriage and divorce. Without Jennifer's expensive demands, he's been able to rebuild his savings and focus on growing the company. I've started helping Michael with business advice and occasional financial support, but on my terms and with clear boundaries. He's learned to ask for help respectfully rather than demanding it as an entitlement. Our relationship will never be the same as it was before Jennifer's manipulation, but it's becoming something new and potentially stronger. Michael has learned to value our relationship for what it is rather than what he can get from it. Asterisk, my experience with Michael and Jennifer taught me important lessons about family dynamics, financial boundaries, and the difference between love and manipulation. I learned that enabling adult children doesn't help them, it hurts them. By always being available to solve Michael's problems, I prevented him from developing the strength and independence he needed to resist Jennifer's manipulation. I also learned that respect has to be mutual in family relationships. I'd been so focused on being a generous father that I'd forgotten to demand basic courtesy and appreciation in return. The house sale wasn't just about punishing Michael and Jennifer. It was about freeing myself from a toxic dynamic that was destroying our family. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. I've used my experience to help other elderly parents who are dealing with similar situations. Through my volunteer work and support groups, I've met dozens of people whose adult children see them as financial resources rather than family members. The most important lesson was that inheritance should be earned through love, respect, and loyalty, not just blood relationships. Michael assumed he'd inherit my house because he was my son, but he forgot that inheritance is a gift, not a right. Asterisk. Today, I'm happier and more at peace than I've been since Catherine died. I live in a community where I'm valued and respected. I have financial security and independence, and I've learned to prioritize my own well-being. Michael and I have a cordial relationship now, but it's built on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. He's learned to appreciate our time together instead of taking it for granted. The grandchildren have learned valuable lessons about family loyalty and the consequences of taking people for granted. They understand that Grandpa's love isn't measured by the size of his gifts or his house. I've rewritten my will to reflect my new priorities. The bulk of my estate will go to charities that help elderly people and support trade education. Michael will receive a modest inheritance, but nothing like what he would have gotten if he'd remained loyal. The house that Jennifer wanted so desperately is now worth over $950,000, and it belongs to a family that appreciates what they have. Every time I drive by it, I'm reminded that I made the right choice. Jennifer remarried within a year of her divorce from Michael, this time to a wealthy businessman who could fund her lifestyle. She got what she always wanted, money and status, but she lost any chance of genuine family relationships. Michael is dating a wonderful woman now, someone who appreciates him for his character rather than his potential inheritance. She treats me with respect and has helped Michael understand the importance of family loyalty. The Christmas Eve ultimatum that destroyed our family also saved it in the end. By forcing me to choose between dignity and family, Michael inadvertently taught both of us what really matters in relationships. I may have lost the house where I raised my children, but I gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I'm strong enough to stand up for myself, even when it costs me everything I thought I wanted to preserve. And sometimes, losing everything you thought you wanted is the only way to discover what you actually need. Asterisk. As I sit in my condo today, looking at photos of the house I sold and the family I lost and found again, I'm struck by how much my life has changed in just 2 years. The man who was told he was too old and stubborn to live in his own house is now thriving in a community of people who value wisdom and experience. The father who was excluded from Christmas dinner now hosts holiday gatherings for friends who actually want his company. I've learned that aging doesn't mean becoming invisible or irrelevant. It means having the experience and confidence to make difficult decisions and stand by them, even when those decisions hurt people you love. The house sale wasn't just about real estate. It was about reclaiming my power and my dignity. For too long, I'd allowed Jennifer to make me feel like a burden in my own home. Selling the house was my declaration of independence. Asterisk. I keep a small corkboard above the desk in my condo. On it are 5 index cards I wrote the week I moved in. Each one is a reminder I can see from across the room without my glasses. The first says, choose daily. The second says, dignity is a habit. The third, ask for help before the wheel squeals. The fourth, document, then decide. And the last, a line Catherine used when money was tight and tempers were shorter. We trim the sail, not the sky. Those cards are my bearings. Age doesn't give you a new compass. It shows you which marks on the old one you can actually trust. My mornings here are simple by design. I make the coffee the old-fashioned way, in the percolator Catherine never allowed me to throw out. I sit by the window that faces the little pond and do the same 3 things. Check the day's list, read a few pages of something worth underlining, and send a short note to someone who needs one. Sometimes it's a grandkid a picture of a bahia dovetail joint I cut for the workshop bulletin board. Sometimes it's a thank you to the woman who keeps the lobby plants watered and talks to them like they're old friends. Sometimes it's a line to the young plumber I'm mentoring now, reminding him that callbacks are not failures. They're paid lessons. After the house sold, people assumed I would carry grief like an anchor. I carried it like a book I had decided to finish. There are chapters I still revisit. The front steps in spring when the concrete had held just enough sun to warm your palms. The pantry door with the pencil marks that told the truth about 6 growth spurts and one particularly determined. Summer of spinach. But letting go of the building did not erase any of that. It just put the memories where they belong. In me, not in the studs. The community here has its own rhythm. Tuesdays are for the woodworking shop. The sawdust smells like the chance to make something useful. Wednesdays are for the walking club. 3 laps around the pond at a pace that keeps conversation honest. On Thursdays, a group of us meets in the community room with a pot of chili and a stack of legal folders. We call it paperwork and peppers. We bring powers of attorney to sanity check, beneficiary forms to update, questions about trusts, and titling that our children would rather not hear. We pass around pens and red file tabs and the shared relief of people who refuse to let fear make their decisions. I've learned that half the terror of aging is paperwork nobody wants to face. So we face it together with cornbread. Rose sits to my left at those meetings, and sometimes I forget there's anyone else in the room. She is the kind of person who listens with her whole posture. The first time we talked alone, she told me about losing her husband, Kenneth, 20 years ago, and how grief didn't leave so much as change jobs. It went from being a warden to being a quiet groundskeeper. It pulls the weeds, she said. It keeps you honest about what actually matters. She was right. I hadn't realized how much of my life had overgrown while I tried to be everything to everyone. We have a routine together now. On Saturday mornings, we sit by the workshop door with coffee and travel cups and read the newspaper out loud to each other, 3 articles apiece. No doom allowed. On Sundays, we go to the late service and sit in the 4th pew, where the cushion is just deflated enough to remind you that you're not supposed to nap through a sermon. Once a month, we take a slow drive past the old street and wave to the maple that still shadows the yard. Rose never asks if it hurts. She knows. She just reaches over and rests her hand on the console. It is enough. I think a lot about strength. Not the kind that lifts water heaters into basements, but the kind that makes a person say no without apologizing and yes without bargaining. When you spend your life solving problems with your hands, you can forget that the hardest work is often an internal tightening. Resolve you ratchet down 1 click at a time until the fitting stops weeping. Dignity is a torque setting. You learn it by stripping a few threads. The grandchildren visit more freely these days. Their mother's schedule does not govern our hours anymore, and that has changed the texture of our time together. We cook. We mess up the counters on purpose. I taught the oldest to sharpen a chisel on a water stone and the youngest to roll out noodles without cracking the dough. I save the letters they've started to write me short, funny things about classes and soccer cleats and a new band I'm supposed to listen to, so I'll be hip. I listen. I'm not hip, but I can hear effort when someone offers it. Effort is love in work boots. Michael and I have found a kind of middle distance that holds. We meet for breakfast every other Thursday at a diner equidistant between his apartment and my community. We sit at the counter because booths remind both of us of who is missing. We talk business, then life, in that order. He brings ledgers sometimes, and I read them without saving him. That is a lesson you cannot give a boy. You can only give it to a man. He knows now that my help isn't a faucet he can open at will. It's a spigot he earns by showing he'll use the water wisely. He's asked me more than once what he could have said on that Christmas Eve that would have changed the course we took. I tell him the truth, one sentence. Dad, I won't choose a house over you. He stares at his hands when he hears it, and then he nods, like he's fastening something inside himself for good. Regret can wreck a person when it tries to rewrite the past. When it agrees to coach the future, it becomes something else entirely. Humility. The scholarship in Catherine's name has already sent 4 young people through trade school. I read their thank you letters at the kitchen table with a magnifying glass and a soft pencil to underline the parts that sound like the beginning of a life. One of the recipients, a young woman named Anaya, texts me pictures when she finishes a clean copper run or a tidy trap. Her work is better at 22 than mine was at 30. I tell her so. I tell her to raise her prices, to buy a second pair of the boots that fit, to eat lunch even when the day tries to skip it. She reminds me that I am not done building. The building is simply wider now than the walls of one address. Sometimes, folks ask if I ever feel petty about the choice I made, whether selling the house was a way to even a score. I answered the same way, every time. I did not even a score. I ended a game one never agreed to play. That's a different thing. Walking away from a loaded table isn't spite. It's self-respect. And selling the house wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary made visible. People understand fences. They struggle with invisible lines. I've noticed that older men like me often talk about their lives in terms of what they provided: mortgages paid, roofs fixed, companies launched, children educated. Those are good measures, but I've added some new ones. Did I keep my voice steady when it would have felt cleaner to shout? Did I aim my anger at the problem instead of the person? Did I let grief do its job without promoting it to management? Did I plan my future in a way that didn't force the people I love to guess? If I can say yes to those questions at the end of a day, I sleep. There is a quiet ministry in showing up with a checklist and a smile. On Mondays, I join a few others from the community to visit seniors in town who want a second set of eyes on contractor bids, insurance renewals, Medicare letters that read like ciphered threats. We bring red pens. We bring level heads. We do not bring judgment. Many of those folks are where I was, proud, overwhelmed, and being pushed by a well-meaning relative with an agenda. We don't tell them what to decide. We help them see the choices. That's all most of us ever needed: a clear table, a warm cup, and someone who doesn't talk to us like we're already gone. I've taken to writing Catherine a letter every month. I put them in a shoebox because I am sentimental and practical in the same breath. I tell her about the cardinals on the railing and the way the pond freezes in a pattern like cracked glass. I tell her about the joke Rose told that I had to explain to the choir director who thought she was serious. I tell her about the day a young father in the grocery store asked me which plunger actually works, and I gave him a dissertation in the plumbing aisle while his toddler tried to climb into the cart. I tell her that I am all right, and that being all right looks different than I imagined but fits me better than I feared. Holidays are different, quieter. I host a smaller table with friends who got resorted by life widows. Stragglers, the nice man from 3 doors down whose son lives far away and who brings the best green beans anyone has ever made. We set one plate with no name and fill it first. Not for the dead, though they're welcome. For the person who is coming later, whoever they turn out to be. It keeps our eyes on the door in a good way. It keeps hope from getting dusty. I won't pretend the old anger never knocks. It does, usually when the world is too tidy and needs a scuff of honesty. On those days, I take a drive to a job site and watch a crew set rough in. If you want to see the truth about a building, you go before the drywall. You look at the lines to know what sort of life they'll carry. Then I come home and look at my own lines. Where am I starting to zig because I'm afraid? Where can I straighten a little because I'm braver than I was? People have started to ask me to speak at the senior center about boundaries and inheritance. I tell stories instead of giving lectures. I bring a box of props, a worn receipt book, a photo of my old pantry door with the pencil marks, a set of keys on a battered ring that no longer opens anything I own, and a little brass shut-off valve I keep in my pocket. I pass the valve around and say, "You're allowed to turn things off. Pressure isn't proof of necessity." They nod in the way people do when truth lands, where it needed to. If you want the practical list I share at the end of those talks, it's this: write the plan you can live with now, not the one you hope someone will honor later. Put your titles where your intentions are. Name a power of attorney you would trust with your bank pin and your worst day. Keep copies of everything where someone besides you can find them. Do not apologize for making your boundaries legible. And if anyone starts a sentence with "if you really loved us, you would," stop the conversation until they replace the word love with control. It clarifies things. I have also learned the value of a clean apology. I've made a few. To Michael, for the years I solved things for him instead of letting him develop the muscle to resist a person like Jennifer. To my daughters, for the ways I let the business be my excuse for missing some recitals I could have made. To myself, for taking longer than I wish I had to say enough. As for Jennifer, I think of her less each season. That is not bitterness cooling. It is relevance fading. Once, when I saw her downtown with her new husband's sharp suit, sharper watch, I felt a flash of what might have been satisfaction. It didn't last. The feeling that followed made more sense. Relief that I am not the man trying to keep up with a life that runs on other people's fuel. I hope she finds a peace that doesn't depend on square footage. I hope everyone does. Honestly, life is lighter when you stop dragging other people's expectations behind you like dead weight. Some evenings, when Rose has choir rehearsal and I have the condo to myself, I pull out the ledger I kept during the worst of it. Dates, times, quotes, the careful record of a man proving to himself he wasn't imagining the water rising. I flip to the last page, where there's nothing but a line and the word closed. It's not a victory lap. It's a receipt. Receipts are proof that a transaction happened, and you are finished paying for it. The longer I live here, the more I understand that freedom is not the absence of obligation. It is the presence of chosen obligations. I am obligated to the scholarship fund because I want to be. To the Thursday paperwork nights because I know what one clear sentence can do. To the walking club because somebody always lags and is steady. Arm turns a lap into a triumph. I am obligated to the boys at the diner who still call me boss out of habit. To the maple tree on my old street that does not belong to me but still feels like kin. To the woman who waters the lobby plants and tells them to behave when the doors open and the cold comes in. These obligations are not burdens. They are ballast. There's a new boy in the plumbing program this year. Calvin, a quiet kid who doesn't say much until he's holding a wrench. The first time he showed up for mentoring, his shoes were split at the seams, and he kept his hands in his pockets like he was afraid of dropping something fragile. He is 17 and has already learned. Too many ways to be small. Last week, he installed a vanity trap that would make a city inspector smile. He wiped his hands on his jeans, looked at me, and said, "Does it ever stop feeling like you might mess it up?" I told him the truth. No, but you get faster at fixing your mistakes. And then one day, you realize you trust your hands again. He stood up a little straighter, like the thought had lengthened his spine. I suppose that is what this season of my life is about, trusting my hands again, even when they shake a little in the morning. Trusting my voice, even when it is softer. Trusting that I can be kind without being conquered. Trusting that love survives hard choices and, sometimes, is made truer by them. On Catherine's birthday, I took a small bouquet to the old house. The new owners keep the porch swept and the railings painted. They put pumpkins out in October and white lights in December that would have made her clap. I didn't knock. I just stood at the curb with my flowers and said, "You're in good hands," to the clapboard and the maple and the air. I left the bouquet on the public side of the sidewalk. Then I drove home to the place I've chosen, where a pot of soup was cooling on the stove and a note from Rose sat by the salt. "Save me a bowl." Back at my desk, the late sun hitting the cards on the corkboard just right. I added a 6th index card with a line I have earned the right to write. Leave the gate unlatched for grace. It does wander through from time to time, usually when I am not performing worthiness for anyone. It smells like sawdust and coffee. It sounds like a phone call from a son who got through a hard day without blaming anyone. It looks like a woman's hand resting on the console while the past stays in the rear view where it belongs. It feels like a shut-off valve in my pocket, cool and ready, reminding me that I will always know how to turn off what hurts and turn on what heals. That is the wisdom of age, as far as I can tell. Not a set of answers, but a tool bag you've learned, through weather and work and a few hard winters, to carry lightly and use well. And when the next storm comes, I will do what I've always done when the basement calls and the pipe sings and pressure wants to make a mess of things. I will go downstairs. I will listen. I will find the line. I will turn the valve with a firm, steady hand. Then I will climb back up, make 2 cups of coffee, and sit with whoever is willing to sit with me, glad for heat, grateful for quiet, and certain that a life trimmed to its right size can still be warm as a house on a winter night.